Hello and welcome to today's webinar, FSC Core Labour Requirements, an Introduction. Thank you for taking some time out and listening. My name is Vicky Tran and I am the COC Manager at FSC International. Today we'll be looking at the following: creating and supporting social credibility within FSC, workers' rights in FSC Chain of Custody certification, FSC Core Labour Requirements in the Chain of Custody standard, compatibility of other social certification schemes. This webinar is aimed for general and interested stakeholders who are interested in understanding the basic concept of the FSC Core Labour Requirements. For certificate holders specifically and other interested stakeholders, we will be hosting a series of technical webinars which focuses on implementation, such as looking at each requirement, the self-assessment template, and demonstrating compliance. The registration for these webinars will be open in April. As part of our implementation plan of rolling out these requirements, we plan to develop a set of online training modules for certificate holders, and they will be available in a number of languages. We aim to have these ready by August this year. There is an online e-training module for trade unions and representatives which is already available. Last year, we hosted a webinar for trade unions and are planning a series of webinars for certificate holders and interested stakeholders. In 2022, we plan to publish several impact stories which highlights the positive impacts of the core labour requirements. All the recordings of these webinars will be available on our website, including this one, which will also be available in Spanish. In addition, we will be developing guidance materials for certificate holders, such as a FAQ for implementation support and a guidance document for certificate holders on how to implement the core labour requirements. Over the years, FSC standards have evolved to integrate the workers' needs better and to ensure improved working conditions. In 1994, the first version of FSC's principles and criteria, which covers workers' rights and employment conditions, was adopted and published. In 2002, FSC approved the policy on FSC certification and the ILO conventions that laid the foundation for full alignment with the basic agreement. In 2005, a members' motion passed that requested a feasibility study on incorporating the ILO conventions as requirements within the chain of custody certification. The completed study was published in 2017. In 2015, FSC published a set of international generic indicators to raise and guide national forest standards regarding workers' rights and employment conditions. In 2021, FSC Core Labour Requirements, similar to those of the ILO Core Conventions, are integrated within the Chain of Custody standard. Including workers' rights in the Chain of Custody certification has been a process where voices of workers has been critical. In 2017, FSC established a chamber balance working group with a technical expert to work on the generic criteria and indicators based on the ILO core conventions. Later, the board approved the report, which illustrated on the 4 fundamental principles and rights at work. The report is the basis for developing auditable requirements, which have been incorporated into the Chain of Custody standard. In addition to the 4 fundamental principles and rights at work, The current chain of custody standard requires certificate holders to commit to occupational health and safety requirements, which includes the appointment of occupational health and safety representative and training staff on occupational health and safety. The new version of the Chain of Custody Standard was published on the 2nd of February this year, with the effective date on the 2nd of May, with the transition period until the 1st of May 2022. However, with the recent board approval, these dates are now revised. The new effective date is now the 1st of September, with a longer transition period than usual. The transition period is from the 1st of September to the 31st of December. The transition period is the year in which there is a parallel phase-in of the new version and a phase-out of the old version. And during this time, both versions of the document are valid, an overlapping period of 1 year. At the end of the transition period, all certificate holders should have transitioned to the new version of the standard, and the previous version will be withdrawn. All certificates issued against the previous version will automatically expire and be considered invalid 6 months after the end of the transition period. In the Chain of Custody Standard, we have a comprehensive set of core labour requirements. The requirements consist of 3 elements: the FSC Core Labour Requirements, a policy statement, and a self-assessment. What are the FSC Core Labour Requirements? Following the core conventions of the ILO, FSC has established the social requirements covering the following 4 aspects: the effective abolition of child labour, the elimination of forced or compulsory labour, the elimination of discrimination in respect of employment and occupation, and freedom of association and the right to collective bargaining. These are the core labour requirements. There are sub-requirements, but today we will show you the umbrella clauses. If you want to see all the requirements, please refer to the latest version of the Chain of Custody Standard. The first requirement requires certificate holders to consider the national law within their countries, while at the same time fulfilling objectives of the core labour requirements. Clause 7.2 covers child labour. This refers to work that deprives children of their childhood, their potential and their dignity, and that is harmful to their physical and mental development. Clause 7.3 refers to forced and compulsory labour. This refers to situations in which persons are coerced to work through the use of violence or intimidation, or by more subtle means such as manipulated debt, retention of identity papers, or threats of denunciation to authorities such as immigration. Clause 7.4 covers discrimination. This refers to any distinction, exclusion, or preference made on the basis of race, colour, sex, religion, political opinion, etc., which has the effect on equal opportunity or treatment in employment or occupation. 7.5 covers freedom of association and the effective right to collective bargaining. This refers to workers' rights to form a union or other representative groups, such as workers' committees. And collective bargaining refers to a way for workers and employers to reach an agreement on issues affecting their place of employment. What is the policy statement? For the policy statements, certificate holders will need to develop a policy statement. which encompasses and communicates their commitment to the FSC Core Labour Requirements. It will need to be made available to stakeholders. It will also need to accompany the self-assessment. We have a very simple example here. The company will not tolerate the use of child or forced labour, nor the exploitation of any children in any of its global operations and facilities. The self-assessment template was developed for certificate holders to describe how they apply the FSC Core Labour Requirements to their operations, and it is submitted to their certification body, which guides the audit process and verification. Certificate holders are required to respond to a set of questions, such as identifying any legal obligations that they believe may impact their ability to comply, and gather evidence to demonstrate compliance and list them within the assessment. In this simple example, we have a company located within Australia. They will need to demonstrate how they comply with Clause 7.2, that they do not use child labour. They will need to describe how they know they comply with Clause 7.2. National law states that the legal age of work in Australia is 15. They have a policy regarding child labour, and they have procedures in place to validate the age of every worker, and they would identify any documents or records they rely upon to verify compliance. These could be a procedure on how they validate the age of workers and their policy statement, or keeping records or copies of birth certificates or other records which provide proof of age, and the copies retained in personal files. In some cases, it may not be so clear. However, it is up to the organisation to demonstrate their compliance to the core labour requirements, even in cases where national law conflicts with the requirements. In this example, we have a company within China. Under Chinese law, workers may only form or belong to unions which are part of the All China Federation of Trade Unions, the sole official trade union organization within China. They will need to demonstrate why they comply with Clause 7.5, which allows for the freedom of association and the right to collective bargaining. They will describe how they know they comply with Clause 7.5. They allow for parallel representation system with free election of worker representatives or workers' committees at an organizational level while complying with Chinese law. They have a policy regarding freedom of association, and they have procedures in place for workers' representatives to raise issues between workers and management. And they would identify any documents or records they rely upon to verify compliance, such as their procedure and policy statements, records of issues and complaints and their outcomes, and any bargaining agreements. Lastly, they will identify any legal obligations which may impact conformity. Under Chinese law, workers may only form or belong to unions which are part of the All China Federation of Trade Unions. The self-assessment template also provides a number of open questions that are helpful for certificate holders to take into consideration when completing the self-assessment. These are some examples. To put it simply, the self-assessment demonstrates that the policy statement are effective in achieving the objectives of the core labour requirements. Lastly, we allow certificate holders to demonstrate compliance to the core labour requirements if they are certified with other social compliance certification schemes. Through this, FSC recognises the certificate holder's commitment to workers' rights while taking into consideration the financial impact of implementing these new requirements, as they were developed to minimize impact on certificate holders. At the moment, we are developing this procedure and it will be ready by the end of this year. If you want to stay up to date on engagement activities in regards to the core labour requirements, such as the webinars that are planned for May, please sign up to our newsletter via our website at fsc.org. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us at chainofcustody@fsc.org. Thank you for listening.